Welcome to Relic Lore. In 1908, inside the ruins of an ancient palace on the island of Crete, a single enigmatic object was unearthed. A fired clay disc, perfectly formed, covered on both sides by 241 unique symbols pressed into the clay before it hardened. This is the Phaistos disc, and it represents one of the most significant, yet frustrating, linguistic puzzles in human history. For over a century, the code has remained unbroken. Today, we begin the forensic deep dive into the ceramic, the language, and the incredible civilization that created it. The disc was found in a cellar of the Minoan palace of Phaistos, inside a room storing archives, placed next to a tablet inscribed in Linear A. It was discovered by Italian archaeologist Luigi Pernier. Its date is generally fixed around 1700 BC, placing it firmly in the heart of the Minoan Golden Age, known as the Proto-Palatial period. The Minoans were a maritime empire, powerful, artistic, and literate. Their language, Aethiocretan, remains an immense challenge. The disc is our clearest, yet most peculiar window into their world. Our investigation begins with ceramic forensics. The clay is key. It confirms local Minoan manufacture. But the creation process is the true anomaly. This disc was not carved, but stamped. The 45 distinct symbol types were individually pressed into the soft clay spiral, moving from the outside inward, a process known as movable type, predating Gutenberg by over 3,000 years. This technique is unheard of for the era. Why use such a labor-intensive, industrialized technique for a single object? Was it mass production or a unique ritual artifact? The text is divided into 61 fields, 31 on side A, 30 on side B, separated by vertical lines. We know the direction of the text due to clear corrections and overlaps. The scribe moved from the outside to the center. The disc also features 5 recurring identical symbols placed vertically, acting as dividers. Are these paragraph breaks, punctuation, or ritual markers? The structure suggests a linguistic narrative, perhaps a poem, a legal code, or an administrative list. We must first understand the grammar before we can interpret the meaning. The disc was found with documents written in Linear A, the Minoan syllabary, still undeciphered. The common assumption is that the disc represents the same language, but written in a pictorial script. However, only a few signs bear a remote resemblance. This leads to the critical question: is the disc written in Minoan, or is it an isolated linguistic import, a message left by traders from the Aegean or Anatolia? Our forensic linguistic analysis must treat it as a unique language system, or a hapax legomenon, a word or text occurring only once. The key to any cipher is frequency analysis. The disc uses exactly 45 unique stamps. If the language were truly alphabetical, like Greek or Latin, we would expect 20 to 30 symbols. If it were a pure syllabary, like Linear B, we would expect 80 to 90. The number 45 suggests something intermediate, perhaps a syllabary with supplemental logograms, or a highly condensed, ritualistic script. We detail the 5 most frequent signs and their potential grammatical role. Are they suffixes, prefixes, or common nouns? The final hurdle is the disc's isolation. Unlike Egyptian hieroglyphs, deciphered by the Rosetta Stone, or Linear B, deciphered by Michael Ventris using an archive, the Phaistos disc has no known parallels, no accompanying bilinguals, and no vast archive to compare against. The text is too short for pure statistical analysis and too unique for comparative linguistics. Our investigation must therefore be one of linguistic paternity, determining its true origin before attempting reconstruction. To truly contextualize the disc, we must step back and map the Bronze Age trade routes themselves. Minoan Crete was a central node in a vast, complex network extending from the copper mines of Cyprus to the palaces of Mycenae, and even as far as Egypt and Mesopotamia. This was not a world of unified languages, but of lingua francas and specialized trade jargons. The prevalence of different scripts, Egyptian hieroglyphs, Mesopotamian cuneiform, and the Aegeans' own burgeoning family of scripts means the Minoans were accustomed to linguistic diversity. Their administrative centers, like Phaistos and Knossos, would have employed scribes skilled in multiple systems. This high degree of contact makes the argument for a foreign import plausible, but it also raises a counterpoint. If a foreign script was adopted, why did the Minoans bother with the movable type technology? The act of writing, particularly in palaces, was primarily administrative. Inventory lists, taxes, treaties. These are the mundane subjects that fill the majority of surviving tablets. The disc, by contrast, feels ceremonial. Its beauty, its perfection of form, and its unique production method argue against bureaucratic use. It suggests a text of importance, perhaps religious or diplomatic. We explore the role of the Kopros, the official Minoan administration, and their methods of training scribes. Did these scribes have access to the full spectrum of global writing techniques? Evidence from the archives suggests a highly conservative approach, favouring the established, cumbersome, linear A syllabary. The sudden appearance of a revolutionary technology like movable type stands in stark contrast to the slow, evolving hand-etched tablet. This is the first major forensic contradiction. Local clay, foreign technique. The Minoan civilization, often lauded for its advanced architecture and vibrant frescoes, maintained a rigid, almost hierarchical system of record-keeping. The uniformity of linear A across various sites suggests central control over script usage. The Phaistos disk breaks this uniformity dramatically, not just in its script, but in its medium. Scribes would have been trained to etch with a stylus. The disk requires precision stamping and careful clay preparation, a different discipline entirely. This points to a specialist artisan operating outside the normal scribal college. Let us return to the clay. Sophisticated modern analysis, including X-ray fluorescence, XRF, and thin section petrography, can pinpoint the geochemical signature of the clay. Studies have confirmed the clay matrix is local to south-central Crete, likely sourced from the Messara plain near Phaistos. This confirms the fabrication site is Minoan. However, fabrication is not the same as authorship. We must consider the possibility that foreign specialists, perhaps Anatolian artisans, were brought to Crete specifically to produce this artifact. They would have used local materials while employing their unique, industrialized method. This explains the local clay but maintains the foreign script hypothesis. The firing temperature of the disc is also instructive. It was fired at a relatively low temperature, typical of Minoan pottery, which preserved its intricate details but also made it fragile. The consistency of the firing suggests professional Minoan kiln masters were involved, further tying the production to the palace workshop system. The final forensic verdict on the clay is conclusive. The object was physically made in Minoan Crete, but the technology and language remain ambiguous. We delve into the specifics of Bronze Age kiln technology to understand the limits of Minoan ceramic capability and how the disc fits this profile. The precise temperature control required to fire the disc uniformly without warping the delicate spiral lines is itself a testament to Minoan technical skill. We turn our attention back to the symbols themselves. The 45 distinct signs do not neatly fall into any known category. If we accept the possibility of a syllabary with logograms, We need a baseline for comparison. We establish the criteria for comparison. Iconographic similarity. Do the symbols visually resemble signs from other scripts, e.g., Cretan hieroglyphics, Linear A, Cypro-Minoan? Frequency distribution. Does the frequency of the signs mirror known languages, e.g., a few common conjunctions, many rare nouns? Phonetic potential. Can the signs be assigned phonetic values, like vowel, consonant, vowel, that allow for a grammatically plausible text? We delve into the most distinct symbols: the plumed head, the shield, the running man, and the cat. Each symbol is a small work of art, highly detailed, which also suggests the symbols were not meant to be quick, administrative shorthand, but rather meaningful pictorial representations. The detail itself argues against the rapid, ephemeral nature of typical Bronze Age record-keeping. It is a text designed to be permanent, perhaps monumental. The most telling sign is the one depicting a 5-pointed star. This symbol is found nowhere else in the Cretan script family: hieroglyphic, Linear A, Linear B. Its uniqueness strongly reinforces the notion that the disk belongs to a separate linguistic tradition, regardless of where the clay was dug up. The complexity of these signs is what has fueled endless attempts at decipherment. We conduct a full visual inventory of all 45 signs, categorizing them into human figures: the plumed head, the crying man; animals, the cat, the bird; tools, weapons, the shield, the axe; and geometric, natural objects: the star, the wave. This exhaustive iconographic study confirms that the visual vocabulary is primarily Minoan or Aegean in style, but the usage is foreign. The final hurdle is the disker's isolation. The concept of a hapax legomenon, a text occurring only once, is particularly frustrating for codebreakers. Decipherment relies on patterns and redundancy. If a symbol appears only 3 times in an entire corpus, its phonetic or logographic value is impossible to guess with confidence. The disker's shortness, just 241 signs, means the dataset is incredibly small. We explore the implications of this isolation. Did the script die out immediately after this one use? Was it a novelty? Or were the other copies written on perishable materials like linen, wood, or papyrus, all of which would have vanished in the Cretan climate? The latter scenario, suggesting mass production on ephemeral media, aligns perfectly with the movable type technology. If true, the disk is merely the master template or the archive copy, not the sole surviving text. We analyze the specific environmental conditions of the Phaistos archive room and the decay rate of organic materials in a typical Minoan cellar, reinforcing the high probability that paper or linen copies would not survive. Before Linear A, the Minoans used Cretan hieroglyphics, CH, on seals and medallions, while CH shares the pictorial nature of the Phaistos disk. A detailed forensic comparison reveals fundamental structural differences. Cretan hieroglyphics are primarily logograms used for titles, names, and seals. They do not form coherent, lengthy narratives. The disk, by contrast, flows in a spiral, suggesting a continuous, grammatically structured text. We compare the frequency and combination rules. CH symbols are generally fewer and used for identification. Disk symbols are numerous and used for extended discourse. The similarities are superficial. Both are pictorial, but the function is entirely different. The disk cannot be a direct descendant of CH, forcing us to look outside Crete for its ancestry. We then turn to Linear A, the true administrative language of the Minoan palaces. Linear A is a syllabary, using around 80-90 signs. We examine the few instances where a disk sign bears a slight resemblance to a Linear A sign. Statistically, these resemblances are too weak to form a genealogical link. The disk uses a much smaller set of symbols, 45, and they are purely pictorial, while Linear A signs are mostly abstract or highly stylized. The conclusion from this internal investigation is firm. The disk is linguistically alien to the core Minoan script family. One of the earliest and most robust theories places the disk's origin not in Crete, but in Anatolia, modern Turkey, across the Aegean Sea. The Minoans had strong trading ties with the regions of Lycia and Caria. Proponents of this theory point to visual similarities between certain disk signs and Anatolian hieroglyphs. Could the 45 unique stamps represent a specialized trade language used by merchants who temporarily resided in Phaistos? We analyze the phonetic values suggested by scholars like Cyrus Gordon, focusing on proposed similarities between the running man and specific Anatolian war signs. The argument for an Anatolian origin is strengthened by the possibility of the language being Luwian. Luwian hieroglyphics were used extensively in Anatolia and were pictorial. However, the Luwian corpus is vast and highly developed. For the Phaistos disk to be Luwian, it would need to represent a specific, highly localized dialect, or a ritual script, which is plausible given the maritime connections between the two regions. We scrutinize the symbol set. Do the 45 stamps conform to the stylistic or phonetic rules of the Luwian syllabary? The visual match is suggestive, but the lack of a known bilingual connection prevents definitive verification. We dive into the specific linguistic structure of Luwian, an Indo-European language with an agglutinative tendency, and compare its known phonetic constraints to the statistical structure of the disk, finding structural but not conclusive phonetic parallels. Moving east, another key link is Cyprus, a major hub for Levantine trade. Cypriot syllabaries, especially those used in the later Bronze Age, share some structural similarities with the disk's field division. Researchers have attempted to map Cypriot syllabic values onto the disk's symbols, proposing a ritualistic text brought over by traders. This theory helps explain the movable type. Perhaps the stamps were part of a portable administrative kit used by a merchant guild operating out of Cyprus or the Levant. The connection to Cypro-Minoan, CM, the script of Bronze Age Cyprus, is particularly compelling. CM is also an undeciphered syllabary, but its structure is simpler and highly organized. We compare the linearity of CM tablets to the spiral of the disk. While the flow is different, the underlying syllabic function may be similar. The discovery of clay tablets inscribed in CM in the Minoan city of Knossos proves that Cypriot scribes were operating on Crete. This makes the disk a plausible, though visually distinct, relative of the Cypro-Minoan family. We dissect the specific characteristics of CM, its derivation from Linear A and its ultimate evolution into the later Cypriot syllabary, and see if the disk fits anywhere in this genealogical tree. The Cycladic islands, strategically placed between Crete and the mainland, are also suspects. The island cultures possess their own unique scripts and symbols. This geographical proximity lends weight to the idea that the disk represents a localized island-specific script that only existed for a short period. This could explain its unique nature, a localized administrative script that fell into disuse when the Minoan influence expanded or declined. We examined the ritualistic artifacts found on Melos and Thera. While no comparable scripts have been found, the artistic style and the prevalence of seals suggest a high degree of artistic literacy. The theory here is one of ephemeral writing, that the Cycladic cultures had a more pictorial, less formalized script that was primarily used for trade markings or religious objects, only one example of which has survived in the baked clay of the Phaistos disk. This concept of a script intended for non-permanent mediums strongly supports the movable type design. The gold standard for deciphering ancient Aegean scripts remains Michael Ventras's work on Linear B. Ventras succeeded by identifying recurring patterns, testing phonetic guesses against known Minoan place names, and assuming the language was an early form of Greek. To apply this to the disk, researchers must first assume the language is a known Indo-European or Anatolian language. We analyze the pitfalls of this method, known as rebus writing, where the symbols are forced to fit known phonetic values. The key flaw in applying the Ventris model to the Phaistos disk is the lack of known proper nouns. Ventris knew where Knossos and Mycenae were located, providing fixed phonetic points. The Phaistos disk, however, offers no clear place names or personal titles that can be matched to a known language. Any attempt to assign phonetic values, like identifying the plumed head as a syllable K or two, is based purely on a circular assumption. The result is only as strong as the initial guess. We dedicate an extensive section to the exact mathematical and linguistic breakthrough of Ventris, contrasting his vast, consistent corpus, thousands of tablets, with the singular, isolated nature of the Phaistos disk. One of the most publicized recent attempts comes from Dr. Gareth Owens. His method involves translating certain repeated phrases using principles drawn from Linear B and Mycenaean Greek. Owens proposes the disk is a prayer to a Minoan goddess, a motherhood prayer, and suggests phonetic values for specific symbols like the plumed head and shield. We analyze the strengths of his approach, the use of phonetic values from a known deciphered script, and the weaknesses, the necessity of imposing the Greek phonetic structure onto an unverified source. Owens's work relies heavily on identifying grammatical markers, prefixes and suffixes that align with Linear B patterns, such as sequences that may represent the nominative or genitive case endings. While this creates a coherent, translatable text, a prayer, it is inherently speculative because there is no external evidence linking the disk's symbols to the phonetic values of Linear B. It makes for a wonderful story, but the forensic evidence for the phonetic mapping remains inconclusive. We break down the specific sequences Owens identifies as mother or goddess, and examine the scholarly objections that argue these are chance correlations within the small data set. Conversely, scholar Stephen Fisher argues for an Anatolian-based script. He proposes the disk is a military list or roll call of troops stationed in Phaistos. By assigning phonetic values from known Anatolian scripts, he identifies names and ranks, suggesting the 45 signs represent a concise military syllabary. This theory neatly explains the brevity of the text and the use of movable type for quickly listing unit details. But it relies heavily on identifying certain symbols as representations of military equipment. The major weakness in the military theory is the lack of context. Why would a military roll be impressed onto a permanent, highly decorated clay disc in a palace archive, when military records were typically written on temporary parchment or papyrus? Furthermore, the pictorial signs are highly diverse: a cat, a flute, a child. While these could be unit insignia, the probability of them forming a concise military syllabary is low. We spend time detailing the specific military items Fisher identifies, contrasting them with the peaceful, often domestic, iconography of other disc signs. The most frustrating path is the idea that the disc is simply Aethiocretan, the native, non-Indo-European language of the Minoans. Since this language remains utterly unknown, any attempt at decipherment becomes pure speculation, forcing the text to fit various linguistic typologies, e.g., agglutinative, isolating, or fusional. We review the efforts of scholars who attempted to use linguistic universals, the rules that govern all languages, to deduce grammatical structure without phonetic input. This approach involves analyzing vowel-to-consonant ratios, word lengths, and the position of repeated signs to deduce the language type. While scientifically sound in principle, without a large corpus, the data is too ambiguous. The Etiocraton theory remains attractive as it avoids foreign importation, but it is currently unfalsifiable. We analyse known fragments of Etiocraton inscriptions, found much later in the Hellenistic period, written in the Greek alphabet, to see if they offer any structural clues to the Minoan language. Moving away from strict linguistics, we revisit the ritualistic theory, where the disk is a hymn to a Minoan goddess. This theory is compelling because it suggests the symbols are entirely logographic, representing whole words or concepts, absolving the need for phonetic decipherment. This aligns well with the artistic nature of the stamps. If the text is a prayer, the repeated sequences are simply "O Goddess" or "Grant us." The radical mathematical theory suggests the disk is an astronomical calendar, with the 61 fields correlating to lunar cycles or specific star alignments. We analyse the pitfalls of this approach. While fascinating, forcing the text to fit a calendar system ignores the obvious flow and grammar suggested by the field divisions and sequence. It treats the disk as a cipher waiting for a numeric key, rather than a linguistic document. The structural evidence against the calendar theory is strong, favouring a continuous narrative flow. Our final forensic tool is the digital archive. Researchers have utilised advanced computational linguistics and cluster analysis to study the text without any phonetic assumptions. We look at the statistics, the average word length, 3.6 signs per field, the recurring prefix, suffix patterns, and the clustering of rare versus common signs. This analysis strongly suggests the script is syllabic and possibly agglutinative, where words are formed by chaining morphemes. A structure often found in non-Indo-European languages like Sumerian or Basque. The digital analysis is the most objective lens. It reveals that the script has the following properties: highly inflected. The frequency of signs at the beginning and end of fields suggests a high number of prefixes and suffixes, common in agglutinative languages. Concise syllabary. The 45 sign count is too small for a purely logographic system, but too large for an alphabet, pointing toward a syllabary, likely one using compound signs. Consistent grammar. The structure is not random. The fields follow predictable patterns of length and termination, confirming it is an organised grammatical text. We dedicate time to explaining the z-score analysis and n-gram frequency used by modern computer scientists on the disk, showing how these methods statistically confirm the text is genuine and highly structured, eliminating the possibility of a random or nonsensical hoax. Based purely on statistical typology, we can infer some phonetic rules. For instance, the signs that appear at the beginning of fields likely represent initial syllables or consonants, while signs that appear at the end are often grammatical markers. This approach, while unable to assign sounds, can definitively rule out certain linguistic families, like pure logographic systems, and suggest that the number 45 is indeed highly indicative of a syllabary with heavy use of logograms. We compare the structure to other Bronze Age languages that are known to be agglutinative, such as Elamite and Hattic. While we cannot claim a direct link, the structural alignment strengthens the argument against the language being an early form of Greek or another known Indo-European language. We detail the mechanics of an agglutinative language, contrasting it with the inflectional nature of Greek, to highlight why the disk's structure leans away from the Indo-European family. We return to the most unique aspect, the movable type. What if the disk was a unique gift, a diplomatic curiosity presented to the Minoan ruler? The sophisticated stamping technique could have been meant to impress the Minoan court with the industrialized methods of a powerful trading partner, and the language itself was irrelevant to the receiver. The most probable theory that satisfies the forensic contradictions is the archive copy theory. The disk is the only clay copy of a text that was mass-produced on a perishable medium, such as waxed linen or leather. The advanced movable type technology was necessary to rapidly replicate the text for wide distribution, perhaps throughout the Aegean trade network. The single clay version found in the Phaistos archive was simply the hard copy master retained by the scribes. This explains the movable type, the isolation, and the brevity. We explore the archaeological evidence for the use of parchment and leather in the ancient Near East, and how this would make the clay disc a high-status, permanent document. Our final synthesized verdict, based on ceramic forensics, linguistic typology, and statistical analysis, is this. The Phaistos disc is a syllabic text, likely stemming from an Anatolian or Aegean trading culture, brought to Phaistos as an administrative or ritual document. It is not the language of the average Minoan, and its extreme isolation means that a full, verifiable phonetic decipherment is currently impossible without the discovery of a Rosetta Stone equivalent. The disc's true legacy lies not in its message, but in the questions it raises about literacy and communication in the Bronze Age. It proves that the Minoans were exposed to high levels of technological sophistication, even if they chose to stick to their own simpler Linear A script. The paradox is a testament to the complex, fragmented, and often misunderstood world of Bronze Age Crete, a world that only meticulous forensic investigation can begin to piece together. The Phaistos disc remains a magnificent, unsolved mystery. But by applying the rules of forensic science, we can narrow the field and appreciate the true nature of this remarkable artifact. If you appreciate the rigor of this deep dive and value evidence over speculation, then you belong here. Relic Lore is dedicated to providing these full-length forensic documentaries. Hit the subscribe button now and turn on notifications to ensure you don't miss our next full report.